Good evening. I'm Joshua Rubin. I'm the former artistic director and clarinetist of the International Contemporary Ensemble. And I'm really glad you can join us for this presentation tonight. In May of 2008, 15 Mexican composers joined the ICE Ensemble in New York to present 5 concerts throughout the city. The festival, which featured the work of 3 generations of composers, Tres Generaciones, or 3G for short, introduced us to a deep well of powerful music that had not really been performed on our side of the border. The first generation in the festival was represented by Julio Estrada, whose works and teaching have had an outsized influence on Mexican music in the 20th century. And his musical lineage is the second generation, represented by 2 composers that had been students of Estrada's, Germán Romero and Ignacio Bacolobera. And the third generation was 12 young composers who were forming their own musical voices at the time. The 3G Festival was the largest project that the ICE Ensemble had organized at the time, and the musical relationships had a big impact on the ensemble's growth. Many of those pieces went on the road with us that season and for years to come, and we formed bonds with the composers that continue to shape our repertoire. Tonight, we wanted to open the vault from the festival archives to revisit some of the pieces and some of the artists that we were introduced to in 2008. We are lucky to have good quality footage of all of our shows from a film team that joined us, directed by Will Hogan and produced by Angela Guido. And the audio was all recorded by our hero and master engineer, Ryan Strieber of Octavin Audio. And in the spirit of that festival, tonight's presentation also gives us the opportunity to begin to collaborate with a 4th generation of Mexican sound artists, specifically 2 phenomenal young composers, Andrea González and Fernanda Cabral, who will present some of their music a bit later. So to kick things off, I wanted to introduce my colleague, percussionist in the International Contemporary Ensemble, Nathan Davis, whose idea this was to kind of open up this vault of archives from the 3G Festival. Hey, Nathan.
Thanks, Josh. It's a pleasure to be here and to discuss with you this fantastic project, which was in formation around the time that I joined the ICE Ensemble in 2007. You were already starting to talk about these fantastic composers and the idea of having this festival. And so as a newly minted member, this project made a huge impression on me, that the ensemble was able to pull off 5 concerts at different venues, all within a week, having 15 guest composers. And this was all like very complex, different instrumentations, larger configurations, solos, things with electronics, just a dazzling array of music that we were putting together on a shoestring. We'd never really gone back and worked with that footage in the intervening 12 years. And so I thought this was a perfect opportunity to go back and see what we had and to revisit those formative relationships. You know, since that point, I've worked with many of these composers in different contexts, as have a number of members of the ensemble, and as an ensemble, we've played their music. So I wanted to start to trace that arc and dig through the vault and see what we could find. It is such a pleasure for this discussion to be joined by two fantastic artists. David Schatzko is the founding percussionist of the International Contemporary Ensemble and who was instrumental in its formation and identity, and one of my favorite musicians. He is currently the artistic director of Array Music in Toronto. Julio Estrada is an esteemed composer, theorist, and teacher from Mexico City, whose career spans 5 decades and whose resume would easily fill this presentation. When we were planning the 3G Festival back in 2008, one of the most exciting things to me was that David was commissioning from Julio a solo percussion work. Given the huge range of Julio's output and David's breadth and depth as an interpreter, I thought we could use that work, Unowiwa, as a touchstone in discussing the process of bringing this music to life. So thank you both so much for joining for this discussion. How did this piece come to be?
It was a long time ago now, wasn't it?
12 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, when you commissioned it, because it was your personal commission.
It was. So it was funded by the now unfortunately defunct Ivar Makashov Fund for New Music.
Oh, I didn't knew about that. I knew him quite well. In Germany we have met, and Italy also. And then in Mexico, when he came to play Nancaro, live Nancaro.
Oh, right, of course, because all the Mancaro stuff, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess at that point, I was playing in ICE, and at that point, we had started our relationship with Mexican composers, which was mostly through Wilfrido Terrazas, was kind of introduced Claire in particular, Claire first, and then by extension the rest of us to a lot of all of your music, and. At that point, I was still in the phase of where I was like looking for the hardest music possible to play, and I've since grown.
Don't look at me.
I've since grown up a touch, but so yeah, and I'd known your music for a long time, and I've always really liked it.
Is a kind of laboratory of my music. Heuristically, I say that it's the way I recycle my own music, because the origin of that is a solo cello piece, which I wrote in '83. When I wrote it, it was in 15 days. A series of graphics with 5 different components called parameters. I don't like parameters. I prefer parameters, which is more components, which is more musical-like. Oriented to acoustics. And one day Bertrand Turetsky asked me to write a double bass piece for him. And I answered, "Are you sure you want the music of me?" Oh, yes. Please have an ear about the original, Unowiwa piece. And there was a Belgian cellist in UCSD who played the piece, and it was really incredible because after playing, it was plenty of water because he was sweating all time. And I asked Turetsky, "Do you want to play that?" So he says, "Well, maybe. Let's see." So I wrote the piece and I give him, and 3 months after receiving the piece, which he was going to play as premiere in Los Angeles, he wrote me and said, "I want to maintain our friendship forever, but I cannot play this music. I don't want to die from an infarctus." I say, "I understand perfectly." So after a series of double bass players came Stefan Scodanibio. And we have a discussion just in this room, exactly in this room. We were discussing, he told me, "You need to learn again how to write music." I answered him. That was always our discussions, this kind of thing. I told him, "Well, you need to learn how to play the double bass with these new techniques." He said, "Are you crazy?" I said, "Yes, I'm crazy. So we met tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and we were 4 hours looking at the score. He could play 4 minutes. No, not 4 minutes, 4 seconds. 1 second for each section. And after that, I say, "You are the player. You can do it." And now I have a piece for 4 strings, 1 noisemaker, one keyboard, any group of winds and any voice. So it's like a Ninth Symphony of Beethoven, no?
So the pieces are combinatorial. You can any number of them can be layered on top of any of the other ones. You can play them in any combination.
Yes, absolutely. The only condition is that they should be simultaneous.
Right.
I remember when you and Mr. Monteverdi, Greenberg, played the first.
Jacob Greenberg, ice pianist.
Yes. A nice guy. I really extraordinary how he played. I was together with David, David was like an illustration of a Chaplin film, whereas Greenberg was playing modern music, very contemporary music. But it was really surrealistic, that scene. One kind of music at the same time than other, really far apart one from the other.
Yeah. And
nevertheless, they sounded as close as they were. So they move in the same way. That's the essence of this series of pieces.
Yeah.
They have exactly the same kind of movement.
And so if I'm remembering this right, the components that you're talking about get translated in different ways. Pitch information in one of the string pieces might become a dynamic information in my piece.
Yeah, exactly. Or color or a rhythm, speed of pulse, or vibrato. Yeah.
But the mathematical information is the same. It just gets
yes. The graphic information. Yeah. It's more physical than mathematical. No. I ignore mathematics deeply. I can take just the idea of the movement of how the music moves itself. So that makes the complete sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why many different versions can be played together. So you have a trio, you have a quintet, you have 10 players together to have one solo, another solo, maybe, etc., a duo, etc.
You sort of end up feeling it together.
It's like wind movement, no? If you have this kind of movement of two waves, but they maintain some way close, not too far one from the other, it works quite well.
And I think also because the scores are so complicated, they're so incredibly detailed. Sorry, yeah. You end up walking that line, that sort of Les Cage sort of discussion line of where when something gets so complicated, something gets so complicated where it begins to be hard to discern between it and improvisation.
Yes.
You're kind of in that same kind of slightly fuzzy boat together. You respond to each other very strongly in a way that you wouldn't do if it were if the concern was to be fully correct vertically all the time, and it's very alive. It's very alive.
So I have learned very much about the voice doing my opera, Murmullos del Páramo, murmurs of the desert. So I learned to do many new techniques. For instance, to sing three voices at the same time. Let me do it.
I remember you doing that on the subway.
And people were running away.
we were as when you were in New York for the Unoiwa premiere. I think you were just working that out. I don't know if it was something you'd been working on very recently at that point, I think.
Yes.
I remember you burst out with that on the subway and people were...
Well, I wanted to ask how you chose the musical materials or the noisemakers for the version for percussion or for noisemakers. Did those derive from vocal sounds? Julio, did you choose the types of sounds or the specific materials? And David, what role did you have in that selection?
Well, it was between Pinochet and Allende, as I said. Exactly.
I think Julio chose almost everything. Like it really, yeah. It was. We went back and forth on some things in general. And when you arrived in New York, there was a lot of fine tuning that happened.
One of my favorite sounds, and I will admit here in front of everybody that it's one that I've stolen repeatedly, is the bass bow on bass bow in contact with a bass drum. It is a fantastic sound, and because I've used it, I think Anna Thorvaldsdottir has used it because it came up in a workshop, and other composers all over the place are using this great sound. So, can you tell me the origin myth of this technique?
Yeah. It was. I wanted, when I was writing the piece for Turetsky for double bass, I had that sound in my head, but I didn't know how to get it. And here, after 10 minutes of discussion, say, "Can you allow me?" Okay, but do it carefully. So then I started, and I became this. Something like that, with less saliva, no? And they say, that's the thing I want to write. That's exactly the thing I am looking for. And I started to play more, say, no, please stop. Say, okay, with this I have enough. I can transform it in many, many ways.
To move the two bow thing over to bass drum, really, yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic sound, and you do so much with it. Changing the overtones of the bow hair, but also the placement of the tip of the bow on the bass drum, which changes the resonance.
Yeah. The one that's difficult to get to, it's a Super Bowl glue epoxy to the tip of the bow, and that's the one thing that's very hard to get to work, because it's also notated to get a Super Bowl mallet sound out of the bass drum while you're doing it. And that one's hit or miss.
Yeah, that's a lot of layers of friction.
Yeah.
And you used it to fantastic effect in the sextet, which we did at Miller in 2013. There's one section where all six percussionists are using the Super Bowl mallets on the different rototoms, and the glissando of the rototom together with the reverse glissando that comes from the Super Bowl. It's just extraordinary. The sextet explores so richly three-dimensional space. And by moving the instrumentalists around the audience and within the audience, and that is a parameter or a component that's it seems to be equally as important as the dynamics, the pitches, the density. So how is that extrapolated from your process?
Well, I cannot avoid to think on space. This is something I was born with this idea, this tendency. I discovered by working with my students that most of my students, which are left-handed, conceive spatial distribution of sound. I think it's a very important element. Why? Because this part deals with the creative processes, non-language. That's an aspect which deals with no language. This is language. Now, it's questioned about how much there are the right and the left part of the brain. This is in discussion. But nevertheless, I think this is something. For me, music is not language. And I heard that from Xenakis and say, this is too close. That's why I was really close to him, you know? To his music too.
Yeah.
We've got very nice discussions about.
Yeah, you know, and I think that's one of the things I responded, you know, because I'm a percussionist and Nathan too. I mean, we love Xenakis. We can't help ourselves, you know. And I think that was one of the things that led me to your music, and one of the things that I responded very strongly to. it's really amazing, Nathan, that you guys unearthed that footage, these lost tapes that Nathan and Josh just unearthed. Really mean a lot to me. It's been really delightful to hear it finally for the very first time.
I really thank you to ICE, to you, Nathan, to you, David, to be this night here. And really, it's a great company. It's a wonderful occasion to speak with you.
Thank you.
With people who will listen to
Great to see you.
The seeds of the 3G Festival were planted many years before 2008, sparked by the longtime friendship between the International Contemporary Ensemble's founder, Claire Chase, and Mexican flautist Wilfrido Terrazas, incredible performer, teacher, musicologist, and a tireless advocate for all kinds of new music. So I think the first thing that came to mind when we were talking about revisiting this festival was that this idea to kind of for us to learn about Mexican composers and to have a lot of voices of Mexican composers together as a kind of festival idea. This goes way back, and it goes back before my time with the ensemble. And Willie, I know that for you, some of these conversations between you and Claire, I think sparked the idea of this festival. So I'm curious, what you remember in that regard, and if I'm right about that, if this was a product of the two of you brainstorming and talking about a festival like this.
Yeah, it was 2005 when you guys visited Morelia for the first time. Yeah, it does go back along some years before that. I mean, Claire and I met back in 93 or 94, and so we've been friends for a long time. Of course, we were not planning festivals or ensembles back then, but we started talking about Claire's idea for an ensemble probably back in 99 or 2000. Well, I was a student in Morelia and she was at Oberlin, and ICE basically formed out of Oberlin. Everybody knows the story and
the origin story.
The origin story, and yeah, I mean there was we used to recommend music to each other all the time, and so I started sending her recordings or recommendations to listen to Mexican composers. She was very excited from the beginning. So by the time, I guess it was in 2003 when we did that, the Chicago Ice Fest, she wanted me to curate a program of Mexican composers. So we did that. I think we had a piece by Édgar's back then, and probably a couple more things. There was even Manuel de Sumaya cantata that we did. So it was a beautiful first experience, and everything kind of escalated from there. So after a while, I just became interested in Mexican composers. I kept sending you guys suggestions. You kept doing that music, and so it was slowly building up to 2008 when we had the festival. It was just a very natural and organic way of just sending suggestions, but you guys were the excited ones. I was just happy to suggest stuff, and you guys were really excited about the music, so I just kept doing, and in gradually larger proportions of repertoire. What I used to do back then is that I would go to each city. I would jump between Mexico City and Morelia and Querétaro and Monterrey, and to a lesser degree Puebla, and then Oaxaca and other Mexican cities, and I would do workshops for composers there. Sometimes in collaboration with the local composition teachers, such as Ignacio Bacalovera. I guess I just started to see connections because of the works that I was reading in those workshops, and I kind of had the feeling that they were looking for similar things. Now, back then, the idea of lineage kind of had more to do. I guess it was much more focused on the teachers, and probably that was not you know, I don't think that was intended. It was intentional. It was just the way I used to focus about things before, on, you know, of centering composers on the musical practice, which has, in a way, been the traditional way in contemporary notated Western music. But in the end, it turned out to be much more about the younger composers. Maybe the lineage was certainly the spark of the idea, but I think the result, luckily, was not like that. We ended up focusing our energy much more on the younger composers, and that, I think, made all the difference and made this festival a really memorable one.
And you mentioned, Willie, that festival in 2003 that we did, that was kind of, like you said, it was a little bit of the prototype. And that was like one of the first concerts, I think, that I was involved in, more than just playing the clarinet. I was a bit part of the setup. These were the concerts that were part of our we called it the 21st Century Young Composer Project, YCP. And it was an open call for scores for international composers. And we actually got like a large percentage of composers from Mexico. And it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And Édgar, that was the first time we worked with you. Already, even in 2007 and 8, I think you were one of the younger composers that you know, were presented as part of the 3G festival, but you were much, much younger back in 2003. And so I'm curious if you remember that experience.
Yeah, I remember that festival because it was very important for me. It was my first international experience. For me, it was kind of a graduation at the time, because as I said, it was my first international experience, and after that, that was 2003, 2004, and yeah, 2008. It was nice to not just to see you again, but that you brought us together. Like I met some Mexican composers that I just heard, but I met them there, and we got to be even friends later. So it was a cool experience to be together.
When you played that piece by Ignacio and Édgar Guzmán was fantastic. I was so happy actually to hear this. You know, like I have not heard music from Mexican composers for a long time because I was very much disconnected. I went to study college in the US, And for years, I was a bit disconnected. And then this was just beautiful to meet these people. The music by Édgar was just so fresh. And so I was just like, oh, look at what's going on now in Mexico. It's fantastic. It's just, and then met Sandra, which I mean, I haven't, really, there were so few female composers. I mean, like really, I was the only back then. I was always looking for where. Now there are quite some women composers, which is so great. But that was also for me like quite a great experience to meet someone there who was also very excited and passionate. And yeah, this was a wonderful encounter. And hopefully there will be more opportunities like that for younger people as well, no? To meet and share their work.
When we saw these scores, I think for us as performers, we felt like there was a strong tone or undercurrent of improvisation, either through the compositional process or the way that it was handed to us as performers, that already was part of this music. So I'm just, of almost all of these pieces, I'm just curious if that was already a part of your way of thinking about composing Marisol and Édgar in this music, even when you were much younger composers.
This piece, the duo that you played, I wrote it when I was at Mills College, and for me, I mean, actually, the time that I studied with Ignacio Calovera, I was really, really young, and I was before I left Mexico to study college in the US. And back then, actually, the hardest thing was like neo-complexity and all this stuff, and for me that was new actually, and I was introduced by these concepts by Ignacio Calovera. So, and it was very fascinating, but actually I ended up doing a master's at Mills College, and was very, very, very fortunate to have Pauline Oliveros as my main mentor, and it was more of that influence actually of the people at Mills that were very much into improvisation that brought me actually to this world, and I'm very grateful for that experience. I remember I was asked to do a graphic score, and it was the first time I attempted to do that. But I was just so amazed of the immediacy of the musicians to understand what I wanted to do, and to do it in such a fresh and direct way, and that it was so effective. And I was like, oh my God, this is also possible. And so I was very excited about it. And then I started definitely to incorporate it into my music more and more. This idea that improvisation and composition are opposite is so absurd.
The 3G project was an opportunity for us to get to know the works of so many artists that had not been performed in the United States. And so Nathan and I wanted to be sure to use this opportunity to continue the spirit of those encounters by hearing the voices of young Mexican artists who we can now call the 4G, the youngest generation of the festival.
First, we'll enjoy a piece by multimedia artist Andrea González.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Yo soy Andrea González, tengo 25 años y soy una compositora mexicana. Actualmente yo describiría mi música como la interacción entre los medios audiovisuales y la electroacústica. En esta pieza que van a escuchar y ver el día de hoy, se puede dilucidar esta relación. Lo que yo les puedo platicar más o menos de Iron Giant in a Landscape es que mi intención era recrear esos sonidos que yo imaginaba que estos gigantes de hierro, que ya verán a lo largo de todo el video, hacían en esta soledad de este paisaje. Básicamente esa fue mi idea. Es muy sencilla, pero creo que el resultado para mí fue bastante satisfactorio y bueno, sobre todo por lo que significaba para mí el estar viajando en estas carreteras. Y pues bueno, nada más, los dejo para que escuchen y disfruten este video.
And it's not an ICE Ensemble concert without a world premiere. So we are happy to have just recorded a trio by Fernanda, Cabral, Kañetas, together with Katinka Klein. So please enjoy this new recording of The Possible Encounters Revealed as Nothingness.
Hello, my name is Fernanda Cabral Kañetas. I am a singer and composer from Mexico. I studied composition in Mexico City. I am 26 years old. The past years, I've been working in pieces that include improvisation. I'm also very interested in body movement and sound coming from the voice, and all my research is going through that part for now. And this piece, The Possible Encounters Revealed as Nothingness, I made it because I was very curious to see how musicians and how interpreters would connect with clippings, image clippings that have different textures, like nature textures and things that we find within our daily environments, or maybe not daily environments. And I wanted to know how they feedback themselves, like in that moment, precise moment, watching those images. And yeah, that's it. I'm like very happy that you guys are playing it and having fun with it, I hope.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Please do stick around for a post-concert chat with many of the participants by following the Zoom link.
Thank you for joining us and for supporting the International Contemporary Ensemble's Tuesdays at 7 series. Your support goes towards artists developing, presenting, and reimagining new works, like you've seen this evening with Joshua Rubin and Nathan Davis. If you'd like to support us and our community of arts makers, and every single dollar counts, please visit our newly updated webpage, iceorg.org/support. Please also join us next Tuesday for an open discussion on our icecommons.org platform, which will be asking the question, if you could redesign a call for proposals or call for scores from scratch, what would it look like? Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you soon.